Hey, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting our students to learn what we teach. And I am Rob Alvarez. I'm the founder of Professor Game and professor of gamification and games-based solutions at IE Business School, EFMD, EBS University, and many other places around the world. And if this content is for you, then please go ahead and subscribe to our email list for free at professorgame.com/subscribe. Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And we have today with us a very special guest who is Jon. But Jon, before we take off, are you prepared to engage?
I think I am. I'm going to say yes.
Let's do this. We have Jon Spike with us, who started his career as an English teacher and later as Technology Integrator. He now serves as a coordinator of instructional technology integration services at UW-Whitewater's College of Education. And he has presented all over the United States to districts, organizations, and conferences, including the International Society of Technology in Education Conference, the Future of Educational Technology Conference, and the Midwest Google Summit. And he has a master's in educational technology from Marian University and is working on his Ph.D. dissertation on virtual reality in education at Northern Illinois University. And he just released his first commercial board game, Gamestormers, in 2023. So, Jon, I don't know if there's anything that we haven't mentioned that we should. I don't know. Is there anything you want to add to that intro?
I don't think so. I feel bad. That's my professional, but also I'm a dad. My daughter's going to turn 2 in a little bit here. And I think that's the only other thing. And just a shout out to her. She was kind of the inspiration for Gamestormers, the board game, and she's on the cover and the main character. So I'd be remiss if I didn't give my daughter Sloan a shout out.
There you go. You got your shout out for sure. Sloan is the name, right?
Yeah, Sloan. Yep.
Got it right. This time at least. So Jon, we're always curious to know what our guests are doing. What are they up to? So we would like to know, what is a regular day, or if there's no regular day, a regular week, whatever you want to go for. We want to be in your shoes for a bit and understand what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned in the intro, I coordinate the instructional technology and integration services in a college of ed in Wisconsin here where I live. And what that means, I really love the role because it's a role I had kind of dreamed of being a decade ago when I was training to be a teacher. I thought it'd be great if there was somebody who really helped teachers, really think about meaningful tech integration. And now that's what I do. As kind of I don't know if I dreamt it into reality a decade before I started, but I work with our instructors and our faculty about tech integration strategies. So part of my day might be in the morning meeting with an instructor and talking with them about some things we can do to integrate tech into their work in training future teachers. So I was just talking with some teachers about the emerging prospects of artificial intelligence in teaching, how we can leverage critical conversations with that. I do teach usually a course a semester. So for example, today before this podcast, I was recording kind of a weekly session. The course is called Video Games and Learning, which I figure your listeners and you might be interested in. It's the intersection of what we can learn about what video games do well to teach, how we can leverage commercial, games in teaching or educational games, and also the conversations that we can have about games in terms of larger society. So I was just doing the live stream of that course. We teach it virtually to our students. We have some topics we talk about, and then they actually engage with some games and then reflect on how those topics, how well those games do with those topics. So we were just doing the live stream of that. Me and my co-instructor, Sharif Jackson, who does a really great job diving into things like diversity, gender identity, and portrayals of things like race and gaming. And then I look at kind of the educational context and how to facilitate conversations and learning with it. So that's a common part of my day, is prepping for that course or teaching it. And I teach some other courses in ed tech at the university. And then also just, working on projects. Like me and my student workers are working on digitizing video submissions for our early childhood conference. So we have a robust early childhood program. And so we're putting on a yearly conference, and we moved during the pandemic asynchronously. So myself and my student workers are working on taking the videos, making them look all pretty, getting them edited up so that we can share those with conference attendees later on. So by my job, really, I love it because every day is different, but that's an example of kind of some things that have happened today or this week in it. And I just love that. And then I think you mentioned too in the intro, I am working on my dissertation. So another fun part of my job is I'm studying virtual reality in education. And so I'm actually prepping another round of my research study where students will actually meet in VR using VR headsets and plan and design a lesson to be taught in VR. And then they'll be kind of surveyed and assessed on how well they design an interactive learning experience. So what's cool is my job also integrates all my passion, my research in VR, my game-based learning and all those good things. And then also just my love of technology integration. So I feel pretty fortunate to have the job and really fortunate for the people I work with and the students I work with. Oh, I should mention too, I almost forgot, when I come home, hang out with the family, but then I should say in the evening, it's pretty much like lock into the game design and promotion and publishing aspect. So kind of when my daughter goes to bed, then I kind of dive into that world from about 8 to 11 midnight. And it's working on game designs, working on the logistics of publishing and sharing out a game. I'm in a big marketing push with Gamestormers just being released, but that's also the end of the day. So after the job's done, it's family and then kind of the side job of game publishing. There we go. The day is done. That's a day for you, Rob.
Plenty of stuff going on. That's amazing.
Yeah. Lots going on, but it's fun. It's fun, busy.
Absolutely. It sounds like it for sure. So, Jon, we know now that you do all of these things, you're in technology, you're in games, you're doing your dissertation as well on virtual reality and education, right? So there's many things going on. And I'm sure you've had plenty of experiences of things going well and things not going well as well. And that's where we want to dive into. We typically go right in with this question as well, because we'd like to know one of those times when, you were doing one of these things and it didn't work out, right? It was a first attempt in learning or a fail moment. Maybe you want to go for what you might call your favorite fail in that sense.
I've got a lot of fails and probably a lot of favorite fails, but I like this story. One reason is because it involves my wife. We had a really cool experience. This one is a failure from a few years back, but we actually, my wife and I, we taught a summer school Minecraft course. We did it for 3 years, and this was probably 5 or 6 years ago now in the district we both formerly worked in. And so the first year we were all excited. We had kind of it laid out. It was 3 weeks, and week 1 was going to be kind of survival mode. Students are going to work together, create a civilization. Week 2 was going to be kind of a design project, a large scale design. And then week 3, we were going to do a variety of just kind of student selected activities in Minecraft. But that week 1, we were pumped. We thought the students would get all fired up about, we were going to say, hey, make this great society. It's going to be fun, work together. And we get in there and immediately day 1, it's chaos, right? You put 30 middle schoolers in the same world and say, hey, get along. Let's do something cool together. And just chaos, right? We had students coming up to us and saying, hey, Mikey, burned me alive with lava, and, Susie stole my house, and all of this going on. And my wife and I were just absolutely aghast at like this first week was a disaster of just discord and disagreement. And we thought just setting them free on that overall goal of make a great world together was going to be fine. And so that fail really had us looking at how we had framed the experience. All these students, had varying levels of comfort in Minecraft, but we realized we hadn't really designed kind of a meaningful challenge for them in that. We had really left it very undefined. We hadn't really given them any clear objectives. We really had just kind of left the students to their own devices and not really given them something to work towards. And so we totally tore down that first week and we redesigned it for the next year. And what we did is we had 2 summer school classes. We told them they're 2 different civilizations that are both trying to create the best one. We defined the criteria for a great society. A great society has a consistent food source for all its people. A great society takes care of its people. Nobody dies, or if they die, they lived a long and prosperous and healthy life. We said, we want to see a sustainable environmental system too. We don't want to see just, just a bunch of cut down trees in your world, deforested fully. We wanted to see a system of transportation and roads and housing system. And we said we'd award points that we'd score based on this. And we'd also take away points for any time anybody in your civilization died. And just with that criteria, explaining it, we'd have the students meet at the beginning of each class and plan what they needed to work towards. At the end of that week, both civilizations were so impressive. They limited, how many students had died. We only had a handful of deaths, maybe somebody, got a little adventurous at night and got exploded by, some creature or something. But we were blown away. They really kind of rallied around that idea of we want to be crowned the best civilization. One class, they came up with an anthem for their civilization. They would play it before each class. So somebody had a little recording of it, and they'd play it before they got into their world. And we ended up scoring, their civilizations based on those criteria, and it was really impressive to see. And it all came out of that initial total fail, just absolutely chaotic world of like I said, lava burning and house stealing and griefing, as they call it in the world. But that's a fail that really comes to mind. And I guess the best news of it is we really did, it pushed us into thinking, how can we really design a challenge and goals that were going to be exciting for the students? And they loved it. Every year, that was always a really popular week because they loved the challenge of how can we make just a great society, and who needs to look out for whom. Some of the students who were more experienced, they built like supply chests near kind of where you respawn. So if somebody did die, they had materials when they came back to life. I thought that was really nice. Kind of, we called it low income housing and kind of, creating kind of a unemployment system, for somebody who's down on their luck, hey, I just died. All my stuff is out in the middle of nowhere. I come back to life and, my fellow people have given me kind of a safety net of supplies so that I don't die again right away. So those are kind of some cool moments that came out of us failing as we just designed a better system for the Minecraft world. So there's my long-winded fail story.
I love it. And engagers, if you listen to the story as I have with a lot of interest and try to sort of look at some of the messages underneath, and it's something that we always talk about, failure is not fatal and it's not final, right? So there's things to learn. And the success that now this experience has with Jon is only thanks to the fact that he did fail at first. Had he not failed, he would never have learned what he learned about his game, about how to make it better, and he would have never arrived to the current stage. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we could have easily closed shop because that first year of Minecraft, it was great. I mean, everything worked, but we just realized we did not design with enough intention our experiences, for those 3 weeks. And we just really went back to the drawing board on that. I think we could have easily said, well, we tried, Minecraft is too chaotic, but we realized it was actually us. We had not crafted an experience to borrow a pun from Minecraft. We had not crafted an effective enough and engaging enough experience to really get that desired outcome. So back to the drawing board. And we like to think we made that course better each year.
For sure. I'm sure you did. And it was thanks to having that experience. And you only get experience by trying, engagers. So if you haven't figured that out, that you need to try to be able to fail, to be able to succeed, well, it's time to get out there. If you need help, please do let us know. I'm sure Jon can lend you a hand for sure. As you know, here you can contact us as well. You can register on our email list and we can talk through email. You can reach out on social media. There's many ways to get in touch with us as well. So go out there, do things, fail, and succeed. So thanks, Jon, for that story, that amazing story. And let's flip the coin for a second. And actually, instead of talking about failure, let's talk about one of those proud moments, one of those things that you solved using games, one of those educational situations you faced. And we want to, again, be there with you, maybe find some of the success factors you might assign to it.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll use this opportunity because there's a few out here for this one, but I think Gamestormers, the game that was mentioned in the intro, is a good example of a challenge that I faced and I really struggled with, and I feel like Gamestormers is a solution for it. I don't know if it's the solution, but the challenge I've been really struggling with for probably 5-6 years now, and it's how to make students and educators and anybody really feel comfortable becoming game designers. How do we help them get over that hump of feeling like, yeah, I could design an experience? I think that's a really challenging ask, but I think it's such a valuable skill and really something that can apply to anything, any field that people go into, no matter what. If you are working with other people and you want to help them understand and develop a skill, designing a really interesting experience is powerful. And so I struggled with that, and I created resources to help people design games. I gave some tips and strategies, but I never felt like I gave them really this good hook that was accessible and interesting. And then I kind of had that aha in about December 2020 of what if there was a game where by the end of the game, you had designed, a game idea. You'd come up with an idea for a game. And thus Gamestormers was born. It was a very different game at the time. It had a lot of excess fat to it, let's say, and you have to kind of, just like with your writing or working on any project, you had to trim the fat. And thankfully, I had a great playtester during the pandemic in my wife, and we play the game, felt like every night, and she'd give me feedback, and I'd tweak things, try it again. And then we opened up our playtesting to students, teachers, friends, other board game aficionados, and really kind of distilled the game down to, you design this 5-card game by playing this game. And the game also subtly teaches you some design mechanics and strategies along the way, so that not only do you get to create this 5-card narrative that you share with your fellow players, but you also get to see some different types of ways you could design a board or card game that maybe people aren't familiar with. I'm hoping this can be kind of a gateway game for folks who maybe have played the standard, I go around a square board and I roll dice, and when I land on a square, it tells me what to do. We grow up on those, where when we're young, those games, are easy to pick up. But can we get into some of these more contemporary games that really have pushed the field in new and exciting directions? That's a goal for Gamestormers too, is to kind of show people that games can be really strategic, interesting, creative. And so I'm hoping that Gamestormers is a way to make everybody feel like a designer. And that was kind of the challenge. And I hope I've kind of created at least one solution path to that.
Amazing. Thank you very much for putting that out there. For sure, Jon. So again, with all the success that you've had, and probably I kind of have a guess of where this is going, but we would like to know if you're facing a new challenge. Tomorrow you get, whether a client, a new class, whatever that looks like, and you're going to use games to solve this challenge. How do you do it? What's your process? Do you have a series of steps? How do you go about it?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And it does kind of go along what I've been noodling on the last 5-6 years is how do you teach game design to folks who maybe just haven't explored that as a career path, as a passion project area. And one really cool thing for me, I approach it from the education lens. I talk to a lot of K-12 teachers and higher ed teachers and students. And what's really great for the process that I found when I'm trying to create a game-based solution is it's really similar to designing a good learning experience. They have a lot of overlap. So I always start with the goal or objective. And whether I'm working with a fifth grader or a colleague, that's my challenge is, okay, what does the goal look like? And what is overall like really a win condition for that thing you're trying to get across, right? So that could be anything. If you're in social studies, you may be trying to, in social studies, create a successful civilization. If we look at the example of, we tried to teach kind of some social studies concepts in our Minecraft class, or maybe in biology, you're trying to, balance an ecosystem or a food chain in an ecosystem. And so now we can work backwards from that for our game-based solution. Okay, if that is what the goal is, now what does a win look like? What does a victory condition look like for that? How would we know we'd succeeded, and what skills do we need to develop to get there? And we can kind of work backwards from that. So that was kind of a little bit of an example. And then you kind of work backwards with the mechanics from that. What kind of game is going to fit this really nicely? And then start actually hammering out the little details of that game-based solution or that game. So an example I can give you is I'm working on a new game. The goal of the game is to help students and adults really understand how social media tries to kind of manipulate us into being consumers and buying and things like that, what its goals are. And so I asked myself, well, what does that look like? I'm trying to help them understand that. Well, maybe they need to be the social media company. They need to understand what the goals and motivations are. So in the game, you're actually trying to sell ads by creating a really interesting social media feed and trying to do the things a social media company could do. Because what's the best way to learn about something is to be put into the shoes of that concept, right? So if you understand how a company is trying to operate, you'll hopefully have a really good understanding and be conscious of when you're being manipulated by a social media company. So I started working backwards from that. Okay, what does it look like? Okay, so I need to sell ads. I need to create content or place posts in an appealing way, maybe use a little bit of emotional appeal. Maybe I put some incendiary posts into my feed to get people keep scrolling through it. Maybe I need to put things I can tell they're interested in. So if this user base is really interested in sports, I'm going to feed some angry sports hot takes in there. And then hopefully I've gotten them worked up enough that they'll stay on the page long enough to be like, ooh, an ad related to sports. Yes, I would love to buy this fantasy football subscription or whatever it might be. So the whole idea there is that I work backwards from that end goal of, okay, I want them to be reflective about what social media does. What does it look like that if they are? And what's a fun way to teach that? Oh, they are the company. And then, okay, what does a company do? Sells ads, arranges our social media feeds, in strategic ways with their AI, and kind of go from there. So that's an example of kind of my process is work backwards. Goal, okay, what does that win condition look like? What does that build up to that win condition look like? What gets in your way? And then start building it out, actually making it. What does this need to be? A card game? Does it need to be an interactive experience? What's going to be a good medium for this, and kind of go from there. So that's my process. That's the process I teach too when I work with students and teachers on game design. And it's been pretty successful. I think we all can relate to it. And I think especially in the K-12 world, that backwards design is very popular. And so that's just kind of a neat connection.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that. Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification. And Jon, what would you say is something that in your experience of using games, especially in education, what could be some sort of best practice or something that if you use it, in your game-based learning or your Gamestorming, let's say, right? It is at least going to help your project be a lot better.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many for this, but I'll try to I'll try to distill it down. And I'm sure some of the, I know all the wonderful people you've had on, so it might be some echoing of things I'm sure they've shared. But one of my favorite lines, and I've shared this on many a podcast, I really like the Sid Meier, who developed Civilizations. He said that a game is just a series of interesting choices at its core. And I think that's a big, just great thing to just have tattooed in your brain when you're designing is am I creating interesting choices? A good example of not interesting choices would be Candyland, right? There is no choice in Candyland. You pull a color and you go to that color. That is a game that is what I call on rails. You are along for the ride. There's no interesting choices, right? Some games maybe seem like they have interesting choices, but they really don't. Like Monopoly, it's like, do I want to buy this or don't I? At this stage, do I want to make deals for my, there's choices. They're fine, but not as interesting. Now you get into some of the newer games out there, and you're constantly weighing all these interesting variables, and you're deciding on, do I go for the short-term benefit versus the long play? Do I trust this teammate of mine or do I not? Are they secretly going to betray me? And there's all these unique kind of, little miniature choices within the game, whether it's a video game, board game, card game, that all the choices really tug at you, and they're interesting to make. And every turn you're interested in what you could do next. And so I think that's a great tip that I'd have. I also subscribe to a concept of always making sure that you've given the players a chance to really try on different play styles. So you're giving players that opportunity to choose whether they're going to, this playthrough of your game, they're going to choose the big, bold, brash route, or they're going to try the sneaky route, or they're going to try, maybe to play it safe at first and then take some shots. And you've given them a lot of different play styles they can embrace. And so I think that's also important too, is ask yourself, could a player look at the challenge ahead of them and attack it in different ways? Those are two, I think, great gamification, game-based learning, game design tips, is you've made interesting choices for the player, and you've given them that invitation to try on different ways to attack the challenge that you've put out there.
I think the core of this is allowing people to actually make their own choices. And as you were saying, some games are a bit more sort of railroading you, but even then, I like to talk about, for example, a game that I played on PlayStation, which is called Uncharted, right? So it has beautiful cinematic scenes and so on. And I mean, once you finish it, you kind of know that it doesn't really matter that much what did you choose here and there. You'll always kind of end up sort of in the same places, right? But how do you get there? It's pretty much up to you. You do have a bunch of choices in every one of these places, or you feel like you have a choice, right? So even if you're creating the sensation of choice, it is important for the player to be able to make that choice and feel that they're actually playing, they're doing something. They have that controller in their hand and they're controlling the situation from their perspective, for sure. So thanks for that recommendation, Jon. That's amazing.
Yeah. I think you hit it on the head. It's not necessarily that the story changes based on your actions, but you feel like the in the moment decisions you made helped you reach that satisfying conclusion. I think is a totally valid way to give that player that sensation of choice. And I always love and respect a game that has a clear ending that they wanted to get across to you. I respect games that allow for that kind of open-ended, well, you might get this ending if you do it this way, but I do think it's really satisfying when I made the choices that ended up getting me to that win condition too. So yeah, very, very good point on your end.
Thank you very much. So Jon, talking about recommendations, we've kind of gone down that alley by now. We would like to know if you have anybody in mind that you would like to listen to on Professor Game, sort of a future guest or somebody that you would be curious to listening, answering these questions as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I was reviewing for this question. I was going up and down. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I haven't listened to every episode, but I perused just and oh my goodness, what are you at? 270 some episodes now, or 200? Yep. Yeah, just incredible. Kudos to you just for being so dedicated to bringing this content to everybody. But I was looking through the list and oh my gosh, you've got so many of my favorite game-based learning individuals. I don't know if I missed them or maybe not, or maybe they just haven't been able to appear. But I think two people who really almost, when I was doing my teacher training, who almost it was like they gave me the okay through our readings in my undergraduate degree when I was becoming an ELA teacher. It was like this, when I read their research, it's like it just told me, Jon, yeah, it's okay to bring your passion of video games and board games and card games in. But that was Kurt Squire and Constance Steinkuhler. I don't know, have they been on the show?
I don't, to be honest, I haven't even heard the names before. So quite interesting.
Yeah. So they work at UC Irvine, but the reason I'm so connected with them is they used to teach at UW-Madison, and that's where I did my undergraduate degree to become an ELA teacher. And so I didn't have them, but I read their research, in our classes, and they wrote about game-based learning. Dr. Squire wrote a lot about actually Sid Meier and Civilizations and those games at allowing students to really engage with systems and critical analysis of decision making. And then Constance Steinkuhler, who they're actually a couple, which is pretty cool too. It's like the ultimate game-based learning couple. She's really studied kind of the ecosystems that surround games. And she looks at how gaming can promote literacy practices and how the esports ecosystem permeates, kind of this gaming fandom into tons of different careers and skill development. And so really reading them in college, it encouraged me to take chances with game-based learning, because I could say, there's research out here that shows this really helps students think critically and engage with all the other texts and really, open up a new angle and a new avenue for engaging learning. So those are two that I just have immense respect for. I've thankfully gotten to meet Kurt Squire. Constance Steinkuhler is still on my bucket list of people to meet. But yeah, those are two that I think would be phenomenal if you could get them on the show as well. So yeah.
They certainly sound like it. So we'll give it a shot.
Absolutely.
And again, still in this recommendation space, is there a book? If I asked you, what book would you recommend to the engagers, these people who are interested in games, learning, and how to use them out there in the world, what book comes to your mind and why would you recommend that book?
Yeah, fantastic question. And there's tons for this as well. I'm looking at my bookshelf, right? It's kind of just to the right of my laptop screen here. And one that comes to mind, and it's actually, you've had both of these gentlemen on your podcast. I consider both of these gentlemen a friend, but Michael Matera and John Meehan are two what I consider colleagues of mine in the gamification and game-based learning space. And they recently released a book called Fully Engaged. It's really a compendium of two of their perspectives on teaching using games and using what games do really well. And that book, I think, is kind of those two putting their heads together and saying what would be kind of our tome to help people really use all of the different ways that games and simulations and experiential learning can kind of come together. So I really like Fully Engaged for that regard. They have a great platform that they run called EMC Squared Learning. And it's all about kind of gamified activities, tools, ways to manage a gamified classroom that they have. And they have, I think, 400, 500 resources on it, all fully editable, scalable for what you teach. And it's just really impressive to see what they've built to help everybody think like that game designer and build experiences that leverage what games do so well to teach concepts, to demonstrate learning, yeah, those two I just have an immense respect for.
Amazing. And they both have their books as well. So.
Yes, they've each individually written books that also are fantastic reads. But when I heard they were writing a book together, I'm going, this is going to be the game-based learning Bible right here, if not on the Mount Rushmore of game-based learning books. So yeah, and it delivered.
Amazing. So keeping up with this sector, but now instead of focusing outwards, we want you to focus inwards. So we would like to know, in your case, what is that thing that you do great, that you do it at least better than most other people out there? When people say, oh, but I'm not the single best expert on this or that, I say, well, Thor flies just as Iron Man flies, right? There's many heroes that can have the same superpower. That's fine.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. Yeah. If I was talking about my superpower, I really think one thing I've gotten way better at, I really think, and I talk about this a lot in designing games, I really love the concept of creative constraint. And I think that it shines through really well in Gamestormers, and also the other experiences I try to design, I really try to leverage the creative constraint. And I'll just define that for you. Really, it's the idea that instead of saying to somebody, hey, come up with a script, a script summary right now on the spot, or, hey, make up a game, idea that you'd love to make someday. What you do is you give them this kind of starting base materials and you say, hey, make something using this, or demonstrate this term using only these manipulatives or something like that. So what you're actually doing is you're giving the player, the person, the student, this kind of starting material. They draw some imagery. They're given like a tune and then a keyword or something. And then you challenge them with, okay, now with that, try to best capture this prompt. And Gamestormers is really about creative constraint. We have this great mechanic in the game where you can roll these dice with icons and make your own card using one of the icons you roll. And so as you can imagine, big hit with the young kids who play the game, the elementary, middle schoolers. Some of them have almost entire games made out of these custom cards they've created. In the game, we have a little arena battle where you can square off against somebody in kind of a quick pitch. So you draw 3 cards, a storyline, an item, and a mechanic, and you have to kind of come up with a little miniature game pitch in the middle of the game to prove, you are the ultimate on-the-spot game stormer. And so, again, if we had just said to the player, hey, okay, you pitch a game, that's intimidating. But if we say, hey, using these 3 prompts, come up with a unique kind of games concept, or using this dice, make one asset of your game. We've now given them this manageable task, and it makes everybody feel creative because we've taken that blank paper away and we've given them a prompt. And I say this a lot too. I say nothing's more intimidating than a blank piece of paper, a blank slide in the slide deck you're making. Ask any creative writer, artist, looking at that block of stone that you need to chisel out something. That's intimidating. But if I have a prompt or I have an inspiration, I think that's really powerful. And I've tried to work that into my whole career, is how can I create those creative constraints for students that get them thinking creatively, that get them responding to prompts in interesting ways. I think that's the closest thing I have to a superpower.
It definitely sounds like it, for sure. And it sounds like a very useful one in this creative world that we are immersing ourselves into with games-based learning. So thank you for that one as well. And Jon, we have arrived to a very difficult question. At least I know it would be very difficult for me, and many guests say that it's really difficult. So what would you say is your favorite game?
Yeah, I had that one on here, and I wrote down notes for, book recommendations, people to have on the podcast. I didn't write down favorite game because it's such a cruel question to, somebody who enjoys games. I think I am going to share a game that I think I just love because I do love stories. I do love storytellers. I love storytelling. And so my favorite game, and it's also one that I think I have just a fond memory because my brother and I really bonded over this game. And the game is Earthbound. And so this is a kind of a modern role-playing game. It came out for the Super Nintendo in the 90s. And you just kind of follow the story of this boy who's kind of told that, like, hey, you are the one who's going to be chosen to stop this incoming alien invasion. And so, you kind of go through and, fight baddies that have been transformed by these aliens invading, and you kind of assemble a party of other kids. And so you've got these teenage kids who kind of rally together with their kind of unique set of gifts to fight off this evil. But the game, what I love about it is the story is fun. It's got a great sense of humor. It's got a unique combat system. And I always just was so engrossed in the story that I felt like the first time seeing the game, I just watched my brother play it. I didn't actually play myself. I watched him play it. And I felt like I was the first Twitch viewer, back in the 90s before Twitch was the thing. I was watching my brother play. And anytime people criticize, the idea of Twitch, they say, well, why do people just gather around and watch people play games? And I think back to, well, I can't criticize them because I just watched my brother play games and I loved it. I loved just experiencing the story with him. And it's like we were watching this big, interactive, funny, charming, yet moving film. But he was a prime actor in the success and failure. And it was actually one of the few times he'd also listened to me growing up. I'd be like, hey, maybe you should try this strategy. And if he had failed a few times, maybe he'd give my strategy a shot. And so we really bonded over that game. So I think it always will kind of be at the top of my list because I have so many fond memories. And I'll still fire it up every 5 years and play it because I just want to lose myself in that story. So Earthbound is going to be the pick, but oh my goodness, there's so many asterisks of good games that follow that.
Many, many great games out there. So Jon, thank you very much for picking one, which is really difficult, I agree.
Absolutely.
But especially thank you for being here, for sharing all of this knowledge. Before we move on to your next activity and the engagers move on to your next activity, let us know if you have any final words, any final piece of wisdom or advice. Of course, where can we find out more about you, your initiatives, your work? And then we'll say that it's game over.
Sounds good. Yeah, I guess final advice, I was mentioning this to you, Rob, kind of at before we started recording, but I had never really thought I would release a commercial game like Gamestormers. And I do just want to encourage folks out there that, if you've got kind of a passion project, just the one way I got this published in, 2+ years it took me to get it all from idea to realization was just each day I committed at least one, moment to advancing the project. And so I think that's my best advice is if you have something you're excited about that you really want to pursue, a passion like this, just make sure you're dedicating a chunk of your day to it and do something that advances the cause, whether it's one email, reaching out to somebody who can help you versus putting in a few hours to really hammer out details or designs or whatever it might be. But just try to dedicate some time and don't hold yourself to it's got to be X amount each day. Be forgiving with yourself. But that's probably one piece of advice that I'd leave everybody with. But then just connecting with me. There's a lot of ways to do it. I'm pretty active on Twitter. @Jonathan Spike is my Twitter handle. But if you look me up, and then @GamestormEDU is our company Twitter, and we're on Instagram and Facebook and all those other ones. But you can also reach out to me at john@gamestormedu.com. You can probably imagine gamestormedu.com is our publishing company, and that's what Gamestormers was published under. And then, if you look up Gamestormers online, just came out, released this past week, and we'd be honored if you gave it a try. And I just want to get a plug in. I'm happy to talk to classrooms, teachers, students. I've talked to a lot of students about the game design process that I went through for the game. I've talked about business and marketing and starting a company, with students of all ages. I love talking to students and teachers about kind of this process. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to continue the conversation. And as Rob mentioned, Rob would be phenomenal as a person to reach out to work with you as well, to help you with game-based learning initiatives and using games meaningfully. So that's, I think, all the different ways to contact me. Probably missed some, but those are the best.
We'll find them on the show notes for sure, engagers. If you go and you look up Jon Spike, Jon, is this Jon?
Yep.
Jon Spike, you'll definitely find it on professorgame.com. You'll find the show notes there and all of the other links that are definitely being mentioned right now. And Jon, engagers, as you know by now, and at least for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey engagers, thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast, and I'd like to know, how are you listening to this episode? If you're doing it through any of the podcasting apps, have you followed, have you rated this podcast? Please do so if you haven't. That way, it'll help us to reach more engagers like yourself to achieve this mission of making learning and life amazing. And if you want the instructions, you can go to professorgame.com/iTunes, and there you'll find at least the instructions to a few of those apps. It should be applicable to anything you're using. And of course, before you go on to your next mission, remember to subscribe or follow absolutely for free using that podcast app, and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.